the rescue and the proposal. Dr. Marcus Chen had seen approximately 17 different varieties of catastrophe during his 3 years stationed on Epsilon 7, and he had developed what his colleagues called an unhealthy ability to rank them by severity. The message that crackled through his comm unit at 0600 hours suggested this morning's disaster would probably land somewhere between moderately terrible and significantly worse than that time the water recyclers failed during a heat wave. Structural collapse in Sector 9. Multiple casualties. All available medical personnel report immediately. Marcus was already moving before the announcement finished, his body operating on the autopilot that came from too many emergency responses. He grabbed his field kit, checked the charge on his portable medical scanner, and was out the door of his quarters in under 90 seconds. The corridors of Epsilon 7 were a maze of converted cargo modules and hastily erected prefabricated structures, all of it held together by determination and whatever engineering solution seemed reasonable at the time. The colony housed approximately 40,000 refugees from a dozen different species, all of them displaced by a war that had carved through 3 solar systems and left entire civilizations scrambling for survival. Sector 9 was in the Valerian Quarter, which meant Marcus needed to mentally review what he knew about Valerian physiology while he ran. Reptilian humanoid species. Body temperature regulation dependent on external heat sources. Respiratory system sensitive to particulate matter. Blood chemistry that reacted badly to most human painkillers. He had treated Valorians before, but never in a mass casualty situation. The scene that greeted him when he arrived was chaos given physical form. One of the residential structures had partially collapsed. The support framework twisted into shapes that made Marcus's engineering-adjacent brain hurt. Dust hung in the air like fog, and the morning sun filtering through it created an orange haze that made everything look surreal. People were screaming in multiple languages, and Marcus's translator struggled to keep up, rendering the cacophony into overlapping English that sounded like several radio stations playing simultaneously. Commander Liu was coordinating response efforts from a hastily established command post, her face streaked with dust and her expression set in the grim focus of someone who knew exactly how bad things were but refused to acknowledge it yet. She spotted Marcus and waved him over. "Chen, thank God. We've got wounded coming out, but we're getting reports of people still trapped inside. Building's not stable. Engineering says we've got maybe 30 minutes before the whole thing comes down." Marcus scanned the structure, his medical training warring with basic self-preservation instincts. The building leaned at an angle that suggested the laws of physics were being very generous in allowing it to remain upright. Smoke curled from several windows, though Marcus couldn't see actual flames. Yet, how many still inside? Unknown. Possibly 6 to 8 individuals. We're trying to account for everyone, but the resident registry for this section was kept on local servers and we can't access it. Liu's jaw tightened. We've got rescue teams trying to shore up the entrance, but it's slow going. A woman emerged from the dust-shrouded entrance, supported by 2 rescue workers. She was Valerian, her scaled skin marked with the distinctive blue-green coloring of the Northern Territories. Blood ran from a gash on her forehead, the crimson startlingly bright against her scales. She was saying something repeatedly, her voice hoarse and desperate. Marcus's translator caught up. "My children. Please. My children are still inside." The rescue workers were trying to calm her, explaining that teams were working on it, that they were doing everything possible. Marcus watched the woman's face, saw the absolute terror there, the primal fear that transcended species. He thought about his sister back on Earth, about her 2 kids. Tried to imagine what she would be feeling if they were trapped in a collapsing building. His body made the decision before his brain caught up. Marcus was moving toward the entrance, adjusting the straps on his field kit, running through mental calculations about how much time he probably had versus how much time he actually needed. "Chen, what are you doing?" Liu called after him. "Standard triage procedure, Commander. Going to the patients instead of waiting for them to come to me. That's not standard anything and you know it." "Marcus, that building could come down any second." Marcus was already at the entrance, noting the way the door frame had warped, the concrete dust still falling like snow. He looked back at Liu and gave her what he hoped was a confident smile. "Then I'd better hurry?" He ducked inside before she could order him to stop. The interior of the building was a nightmare rendered in dust and shadow. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically, casting everything in intermittent illumination that made depth perception nearly impossible. The air tasted like concrete and smoke, and Marcus pulled his respirator up over his nose and mouth, thankful for the recycled air. The building groaned around him, a sound like an animal in pain, and somewhere distant he heard the shriek of metal under stress. "Hello?" he called out, his voice muffled by the respirator. "Anyone here? I'm a doctor. I'm here to help." For a moment, there was nothing but the settling sounds of destruction. Then, faint and terrified, he heard it. A child crying. Marcus moved toward the sound, navigating around fallen debris and trying not to think about the fact that he was essentially walking through a structure that was actively deciding whether to remain vertical. His scanner was picking up life signs, multiple contacts, all small. Children. The readings were coming from what his mental map suggested was a residential unit toward the back of the building. He found them in what had once been a living area. 3 children huddled together in the corner farthest from the collapsed wall. They were Valerian, their scales showing the lighter coloring of juveniles. The oldest couldn't have been more than 10 human years, holding the 2 smaller ones close with a protective posture that made Marcus's chest tighten. All 3 were covered in dust, their large eyes reflecting the emergency lighting in shades of gold and amber. "Hey," Marcus said softly, keeping his voice calm despite the adrenaline screaming through his system. "Hey there. I'm Dr. Chen. I'm going to get you out of here, okay?" The oldest child stared at him with an expression Marcus recognized from too many disaster zones. The look of someone who had stopped believing rescue was possible. "You are human," the child said in accented but clear English. "Why would you help us?" The question hit Marcus harder than it should have. Because what kind of world had these kids experienced where cross-species compassion was surprising? "Because you need help," he said simply. "And because I'm pretty good at helping. Now, can you tell me your names?" "I am Lyra," the oldest said. "This is Kale and Zevin." He is scared. The youngest was indeed scared, clinging to his siblings and making a high-pitched keening sound that Marcus's translator couldn't quite process but understood viscerally as distress. The middle child, Kale, watched Marcus with eyes that seemed too old for his face. Marcus moved closer, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "Okay, Lyra, Kale, Zevin. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to leave this building together and we're going to do it quickly. Can you all walk?" "Zevin's leg is hurt," Lyra reported. "Something fell on it when the shaking happened." Marcus's scanner confirmed a probable fracture. Not life-threatening in the immediate sense, but the child wouldn't be able to walk on it. The building groaned again, more insistently this time, and dust rained down from the ceiling. They had minutes at best. "All right, new plan. Zevin, I'm going to carry you. Lyra, Kale, you're going to hold on to me, one on each side. We're going to move fast and we're not going to stop no matter what happens. Understand?" All 3 children nodded. Marcus crouched down and carefully lifted Zevin, the child's weight lighter than he expected. Valerian bone structure was different from human, adapted for their higher gravity homeworld. Zevin wrapped his arms around Marcus's neck with the desperate grip of terrified youth. "Lyra, Kale, grab on." They did, small hands gripping his jacket with surprising strength. Marcus stood, his back and knees protesting the awkward weight distribution but functional enough. He turned toward the door just as the building decided it had been patient long enough. The collapse started with a sound like thunder, except thunder didn't usually come with the sensation of the floor tilting beneath your feet. Marcus ran, his body curled protectively around the children as debris began to rain down. A support beam crashed down directly where they had been standing seconds before. The ceiling peeled away in sections, revealing sky that Marcus didn't have time to appreciate. He saw the door, saw rescue workers beyond it waving frantically, saw Commander Lu's face frozen in an expression of horror. 20 feet. 15 feet. 10 feet. The floor beneath his left foot gave way and Marcus lunged forward, throwing himself and the children toward the entrance with every ounce of strength he possessed. Hands grabbed him. Multiple hands pulling him and his precious cargo through the doorframe and away from the building. Marcus hit the ground hard, his body still wrapped around the children, and felt something in his ribs crack. Pain bloomed across his back like fire, and his vision went white for a moment. Behind them, the building finished its surrender to gravity. The collapse was total and spectacular, a cloud of dust billowing outward like an explosion. Marcus felt the shockwave wash over them, felt debris pelting his back, felt the heat of electronics shorting out. Then it was over. The dust began to settle. The screaming had stopped. In its place was an eerie silence broken only by the sound of settling rubble and Marcus's own ragged breathing. "Is everyone okay?" he managed to gasp. "Kids, are you okay?" Lyra's voice came from somewhere near his shoulder. "We are alive. You saved us." "Yeah, well." Marcus tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as his ribs informed him that movement was no longer allowed. "That's kind of my job. Though next time, maybe we could skip the dramatic building collapse part." Medics swarmed them, and Marcus found himself being professionally but firmly removed from the children so they could all be examined. He watched through a haze of pain as the 3 young Valorians were checked over, seeing their mother arrive and fold all 3 into an embrace that needed no translation. The woman looked up at Marcus across the chaos, her eyes meeting his, and he saw something there that he couldn't quite name but that made the pain in his ribs seem suddenly very far away. Commander Lu appeared above him, her face smudged with dust and her expression cycling between relief and fury. That was the single most idiotic, reckless, foolish thing I have ever witnessed in 20 years of military service. Did it work though? Marcus asked. That is absolutely not the point, Chin. It kind of feels like the point from where I'm lying. Lu's expression cracked slightly, revealing something that might have been a smile. You're buying drinks for the entire medical unit when we get back to base. And you're filing the incident report yourself because I don't have the vocabulary to describe what you just did. Fair enough. Marcus let his eyes close for a moment. Can someone tell me if I broke anything important? A medic appeared in his field of vision, scanner already humming. 2 cracked ribs, extensive bruising, first-degree burns on your back and shoulders, and what my scanner is diplomatically calling significant tissue trauma. You're going to feel like you got hit by a cargo hauler for about 2 weeks. Only 2 weeks? That's almost optimistic. They loaded him onto a stretcher, which Marcus protested was completely unnecessary until his body informed him that actually, yes, it was very necessary. As they carried him toward the medical facility, he caught one more glimpse of the Valerian mother and her children. All 4 of them were watching him with expressions he couldn't quite read. It would be 3 days before Marcus learned that those 3 children were Princess Lyra, Prince Kale, and Prince Zevon of the Valerian royal house. That their mother was Queen Sarita, last surviving member of the ruling dynasty of a planet that no longer existed. That by saving them, he had invoked an ancient Valerian custom that would change the trajectory of his entire life. But in that moment, being carried away from a building he should never have entered, Marcus only knew that he had done what needed doing. 3 kids had needed help and he had been in a position to provide it. The rest, as he would tell Commander Lu later, was just details. The medical scanner informed Marcus that he had been very foolish with his body and his body agreed enthusiastically. Every movement was a new adventure in discovering muscles he didn't know he had, and his ribs had apparently decided to file a formal complaint about his life choices. He spent 2 days in medical observation, which mostly consisted of him insisting he was fine while medical equipment beeped disapprovingly at his vital signs. On the morning of the 3rd day, Commander Lu appeared in his recovery room with an expression that Marcus had learned to associate with situations that were about to become complicated in interesting ways. How are you feeling, Chin? Like I had an intimate encounter with a collapsing building, which coincidentally, I did. Marcus shifted in the bed, winced, and decided that movement was overrated anyway. What's happened? Do we have casualty numbers from the collapse? 12 injured, 3 critical but stable. 0 fatalities, largely because someone did something monumentally stupid that happened to work. Lu pulled up a chair, which was never a good sign. When Lu sat down, it meant conversations were about to get serious. Marcus, what do you know about Valerian culture? Reptilian humanoid species. Communal society structure. Strong emphasis on family units and generational responsibility. They've got that whole color-changing scale thing when they experience strong emotions. Why? What about their customs regarding life debts? Marcus searched his memory, coming up mostly blank. I know some species have traditions around that concept, but I don't know specifics for Valorians. Why do I feel like I'm about to learn something that will complicate my life? Lu's expression suggested his instincts were correct. When a Valorian's life is saved, especially a child's life, their culture recognizes a bond called a kethrana. Roughly translates to life-sharing, or soul binding. The person who saves the life becomes essentially part of the family unit. It's considered one of the most sacred relationships in their culture. Okay, that's actually kind of beautiful. So the kids I pulled out, I'm like, what, an honorary uncle or something? It's more complicated than that when the lives you saved belong to the royal family. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly, and it had nothing to do with his injuries. I'm sorry, what? The 3 children you rescued are Princess Lyra, Prince Kale, and Prince Zevon. Their mother is Queen Sarita of Valoria. Or rather, former queen, since Valoria no longer exists as a planetary entity. She's currently the leader of approximately 20,000 Valerian refugees here on Epsilon 7. Marcus's brain attempted to process this information and found itself lacking the necessary processing power. I saved alien royalty. You did. That's just fantastic. That's exactly the kind of complication I needed in my life. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, which was still gritty with dust despite multiple showers. So what does this mean? Do I need to learn some kind of formal bow? Is there a protocol for this? It means, Lou said carefully, that Queen Sarita has requested a formal meeting with you. She invoked the Kethrana tradition and wishes to discuss what that means going forward. Can I say no? You saved her children's lives, Marcus. She's a queen whose entire world was destroyed. Her husband died holding off an invasion so their people could evacuate. Those 3 children are literally all she has left of her family, and you risked your life to save them. Lou met his eyes. No, you can't say no. And frankly, I don't think you want to. She was right, which was annoying. Marcus thought about the 3 small faces, about Lyra's protective grip on her siblings, about Zevon's terrified keening, about Kale's eyes that had seen too much too soon. When does she want to meet? Tomorrow if you're medically cleared. I'll be there as your commanding officer and as an observer. The Valerian Council is taking this very seriously. No pressure then. Lou stood, her expression softening slightly. For what it's worth, Marcus, what you did was extraordinary. Stupid but extraordinary. Those kids are alive because you didn't hesitate. After she left, Marcus lay in his recovery bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to imagine what a meeting with alien royalty would involve and coming up with absolutely nothing useful. He had joined the medical corps to help people, had volunteered for refugee colony duty because it seemed like the place he could do the most good. Nowhere in his career planning had he anticipated anything involving queens or ancient bonding traditions or the weight of saving royal children. His comm unit beeped. A message from his sister back on Earth, responding to his brief note that he'd been injured but was fine. Her message was typical Andrea. Injured how? Fine is not a medical assessment. Call me immediately or I'm filing a formal complaint with your commanding officer. Marcus smiled despite himself and dictated a response assuring her he was genuinely fine and that he would call when he had more time. He didn't mention the royal family part. Some things were too complicated to explain in a text message. Sleep came eventually, though his dreams were filled with collapsing buildings and small hands gripping his jacket and eyes that reflected emergency lighting in shades of gold. The next morning arrived with the inevitability of celestial mechanics and a medical scanner that grudgingly admitted Marcus was healed enough to be released. A nurse helped him into a clean uniform, which required more assistance than Marcus wanted to admit, and reminded him to take it easy for at least another week. I'm sitting in a meeting, not running a marathon, Marcus protested. You have 2 cracked ribs and burns across 20% of your back. Sitting is going to be more athletic than you think. She was, unfortunately, correct. By the time Marcus made it to conference room 7 in the administrative sector, he was significantly more aware of his injuries than he had been 20 minutes ago. Commander Lou was already there, along with several people Marcus didn't recognize. 3 of them were clearly Valerian, their formal robes marking them as individuals of importance. The 4th was human, probably a diplomatic liaison based on her expression of professional neutrality. Dr. Chin, Lou said formally. Thank you for coming. May I introduce Council Member Draxon, Council Member Thesha, and Council Member Karath of the Valerian Refugee Leadership. And this is Ambassador Williams from Earth Colonial Administration. Marcus attempted something resembling a respectful nod to all of them, which his ribs immediately protested. Honored to meet you all. I apologize for my current physical limitations. You sustained those injuries saving the lives of our future, the one introduced as Draxon said, his voice carrying harmonics that Marcus's translator struggled with. There is no apology necessary. Only gratitude that transcends adequate expression. Before Marcus could formulate a response to that, the door opened again. The woman who entered made the room feel suddenly smaller, her presence demanding attention in a way that had nothing to do with her formal robes or the way the council members immediately stood straighter. She was tall for a Valerian, her scales showing the deep emerald coloring of the royal bloodline. Her eyes were the same gold as her children's, but where theirs held the innocence of youth, hers carried the weight of loss and responsibility in equal measure. Queen Sarita looked at Marcus and he felt the intensity of that gaze like a physical thing. Dr. Marcus Chin, she said, her English nearly perfect despite the slight accent. You saved my children. Marcus found himself standing despite his ribs' strong objections. Your Majesty. Yes, I happened to be nearby when the collapse occurred. Any medic would have done the same. No, Sarita said quietly, moving closer. No, most would not have. Most would have calculated the risk and decided it was too great. You calculated the risk and decided 3 lives were worth it. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the faint shimmer of her scales, the way they shifted colors subtly in the artificial light. You ran into a dying building for children you did not know, of a species not your own, with no guarantee of survival. That is not simply professional duty. That is courage and compassion that transcends species. I just did what needed doing, Marcus said, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the weight of her attention. That is what makes it remarkable. Sarita took a breath, her scales rippling with colors Marcus's translator helpfully identified as indicating deep emotion and formal intent. Dr. Chin, in my culture, when someone saves a life, particularly a child's life, they become bound to that family through Kethrana. It is a sacred bond, recognized above all other relationships save that of blood parent to child. Commander Liu explained a bit about that tradition. I'm honored to be considered part of your family in any capacity, Your Majesty. I am not finished. Sarita's gaze held his, intense and searching. The bond of Kethrana traditionally makes the lifesaver an adopted member of the family, with all rights and responsibilities that entails. But you did not save 1 life. You saved 3. My 3 children. The only family I have remaining. Her voice wavered slightly before steadying. My husband died defending our evacuation. Our planet is gone. Our civilization exists now only in the refugees scattered across a dozen colonies. I lead 20,000 people who have lost everything and look to me for hope I do not always possess. Marcus felt the weight of her words, the immensity of grief and responsibility she carried. Your Majesty, I can't imagine what you've endured. My children trust you, Sarita continued as if he hadn't spoken. In the 3 days since you saved them, they have spoken of nothing else. Lyra says you were calm when she was terrified. Kale wants to know how human biology allows you to run carrying 3 Valerian children. Zevin has informed anyone who will listen that the medicine human smells warm and safe. Her expression shifted, something vulnerable showing through the royal composure. They have not felt safe since we fled our dying world. You gave them that even in the midst of disaster. Children are resilient, Marcus said. They'll continue healing with or without me. Yes. But healing is easier when done with support. Sarita straightened, her scales shifting to colors that Marcus's translator identified as formal declaration and binding intent. Dr. Marcus Chin, I invoke the ancient right of Kethrana and extend to you an offer of bonding. Not merely as adopted family, but as partner in raising my children and rebuilding my people. I ask you to become my consort, to share in the responsibilities of leadership and parenthood, to help guide 3 young lives that have already been marked by too much loss. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus was aware that everyone in the room was staring at him, that his mouth was probably hanging open in a way that was completely undignified, that his brain had apparently decided to take an extended vacation and leave him to deal with this situation alone. I'm sorry, he finally managed. You're asking me to marry you? I am asking you to partner with me in the most important work there is, giving my children a future, giving my people hope, showing them that survival is possible, that family can be rebuilt, that not everything is lost. Sarita's voice softened. I am asking you to be what I cannot be alone. Enough. Marcus looked at Commander Liu, who was very carefully not showing any expression at all. Looked at the Valerian Council members, who were watching with intense interest. Looked at Ambassador Williams, who seemed to be taking notes. Your Majesty, I'm honored. Truly. But I'm just a doctor. I don't know anything about leadership or politics or royalty. I organize medical supplies and stitch people up and sometimes make very poor decisions about running into collapsing buildings. I'm not consort material. You are exactly what we need, Draxon interjected. Someone who sees people first, positions second. Someone whose instinct is to help rather than calculate advantage. My children need a father figure who is genuine, Sarita said. Not someone performing a role for political gain. You have already shown them more authentic care in one act of courage than many would show in a lifetime of duty. Marcus's mind was racing, trying to process what was being asked of him. Marriage. To an alien queen. Instant parenthood to 3 royal children. Leadership of 20,000 refugees. Everything about it was impossible and overwhelming and absolutely insane. Can I, he started then stopped. Can I have time to think about this? And maybe meet with the children again, when they're not being rescued from imminent death. Sarita's expression shifted to something that might have been relief. Yes. Yes, of course. This is not a demand, Dr. Chin. It is an offer. One that comes with enormous responsibility and difficulty. I would not want you to accept without understanding what you would be agreeing to. Thank you, Your Majesty. Marcus felt his ribs reminding him that standing for extended periods was not currently advisable. I appreciate your consideration and your trust. This is just a lot to process. We will arrange for you to spend time with Lyra, Kale, and Zevon over the coming days. Know them as children rather than as the disaster victims you saved. See if you can imagine a life with us. Sarita moved toward the door, her council members following. She paused at the threshold looking back. And Dr. Chin? I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be present. There is a significant difference. After they left, Marcus lowered himself carefully back into his chair and looked at Commander Liu. Did that actually just happen, or did I hit my head harder than the medical scanner indicated? That happened. Liu was trying very hard not to smile and failing. An alien queen just proposed to you. That has to be a first for our medical corps. What do I even do with this? There's no protocol for this situation. You do exactly what she suggested. You meet the children. You learn about their culture. You figure out if this is something you can genuinely commit to or if it's too overwhelming. Liu's expression softened. But Marcus, for what it's worth, I've seen you with pediatric patients. You're good with kids. And from what I've observed of the royal family, they need someone genuine more than they need someone polished. Marcus spent the rest of the day in a daze, going through the motions of his duties while his mind spun with impossibilities. By evening, word had apparently spread through the medical unit, because Nurse Yuki cornered him in the supply room with an expression of barely contained excitement. Is it true? Did the Valerian Queen actually propose to you? Can we please not make this a thing? Marcus pleaded. Oh, it's already a thing. It's the biggest thing that's happened on this colony since the water recyclers failed. You're going to be alien royalty. Do you get a crown? Does the consort get a crown? I haven't even said yes yet. But you're going to, right? Yuki's expression turned serious. I mean, I've seen those kids in the medical records. They've been through hell. They need someone stable and kind. That's you. I'm not stable. I ran into a collapsing building. You ran into a collapsing building to save children. That's not instability, Marcus. That's exactly the kind of person who should be raising royal kids. She punched his arm lightly. Also, I call dibs on being your best human at the wedding. I'm assuming there's some kind of ceremony. There's always a ceremony. You're getting way ahead of things. Maybe. Or maybe I'm seeing something you're too panicked to see yet. Yuki headed for the door, paused. Those kids chose you, Marcus. In their way, by surviving because of you, they chose you. And from what I hear, their mom is choosing you for all the right reasons. Don't overthink yourself out of something that might actually be extraordinary. Marcus spent that night in his quarters, staring at his ceiling and trying to imagine what his life would look like if he said yes. He thought about 3 small faces, about a queen carrying impossible burdens, about the idea of being enough for people who had lost everything. His sister's video call came through at 2,300 hours, and Marcus accepted it with a mixture of relief and trepidation. Andrea's face appeared on the screen, her expression cycling rapidly through concern, curiosity, and what looked like predatory amusement. Okay, little brother. I got a very interesting message from Commander Liu, who apparently thought I should be informed about certain developments before I heard them through military gossip channels. Want to explain why an alien queen is trying to marry you? It's complicated. I have time. Explain. So Marcus did, walking her through the rescue, the Kethrana tradition, Sarita's proposal, all of it. Andrea listened with the focused attention she brought to everything, her expression shifting as he talked. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, are you going to say yes? I don't know. It's insane, Andrea. I'd be instant father to 3 kids, consort to a queen, co-leader of thousands of refugees. I'm not qualified for any of that. Were you qualified to run into a collapsing building? That was different. How? Marcus struggled for an answer. That was just instinct. Reaction. Maybe this should be too. Andrea leaned closer to the camera. Marcus, you've spent your entire adult life helping people. You're good at it because you care, genuinely care about everyone you treat. These people need that. Those kids need that. Stop thinking about qualifications and start thinking about whether you want this. Whether you can see yourself in this life. What if I fail? What if I'm not enough? Then you'll figure it out like you always do. But I think you're asking the wrong question. His sister smiled, the expression soft and knowing. The question isn't whether you're enough. It's whether you want to try. Do you? Marcus thought about 3 children who had clung to him in the darkness. Thought about a queen carrying grief and hope in equal measure. Thought about the possibility of building something meaningful from the ruins of catastrophe. Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah, I think I do. Then stop overthinking it and say yes. Andrea's expression turned mock stern. But I want to be at this alien wedding. I'm not missing my brother marrying royalty. You're as bad as Yuki. Yuki has excellent taste. Now go to sleep. You look like death warmed over, and you can't meet your future stepchildren looking like a disaster victim. I literally am a disaster victim. Details. Love you, little brother. Try not to panic too much. The call ended, and Marcus was left alone with his thoughts and a decision that felt simultaneously terrifying and inevitable. He thought about what Sarita had said. She wasn't asking for perfect, just present. Maybe that was something he could do. Maybe that was exactly what they all needed. Building a new family. The next morning arrived with the kind of nervous energy that Marcus usually associated with major surgical procedures or diplomatic incidents. He had agreed to meet with the children in the royal family's quarters, which his brain kept insisting on categorizing as absurdly informal given that you're essentially interviewing to become their father. Commander Liu had offered to accompany him, but Marcus declined. This felt like something he needed to do alone, without the weight of military protocol hovering in the background. The Valerian residential sector was a collection of modified habitat modules that someone had attempted to make welcoming with fabric hangings and portable heating units. Valorians needed higher ambient temperatures than humans, and Marcus felt the warmth wash over him as he approached the entrance. A guard stood outside, her scales showing the distinctive pattern of the royal security detail. She regarded Marcus with an expression that might have been curiosity or might have been assessment. Dr. Chin. Her Majesty is expecting you. The children have been anticipating your arrival for approximately 3 hours and are currently engaged in what Princess Lyra describes as strategic waiting. Strategic waiting? They are attempting to appear casual and not at all excited. The attempt is unsuccessful. The guard's scales shifted to colors that Marcus's translator identified as amusement. They are very young and very obvious. Marcus felt some of his nervousness ease slightly. Good to know. Should I knock or just go in? Her Majesty requested that you enter directly. She thought formal announcements might increase the children's anxiety. The interior of the royal quarters was surprisingly modest. Yes, there were rich fabrics and carefully maintained cultural artifacts, but the overall impression was of a family space rather than a throne room. Heating panels lined the walls, and Marcus immediately understood why when he saw Zevin curled up on a cushion near one, basking like a small reptile in the warmth. Sarita rose from where she had been reading, her movements graceful despite the obvious exhaustion Marcus recognized in the set of her shoulders. She wore simpler robes today, deep blue that brought out the emerald undertones of her scales. Dr. Chin. Thank you for coming. Your Majesty. Marcus attempted a respectful nod and only partially succeeded. His ribs were healing but remained opinionated about certain movements. Please, when we are not in formal settings, call me Sarita. If we are to explore this partnership, standing on ceremony at every moment will become exhausting. She gestured toward the children, who were indeed attempting to look casual and failing entirely. I believe you remember Lyra, Kale, and Zevin. All 3 children were staring at him with varying degrees of intensity. Lyra sat with forced dignity, her back straight and her hands folded, but her tail was swishing back and forth with barely contained excitement. Kale had abandoned any pretense of calm and was bouncing slightly on his cushion. Zevin had raised his head from his basking spot and was watching Marcus with those enormous golden eyes. Hi, Marcus said, feeling suddenly and completely out of his depth. He was good with pediatric patients, but this was different. These weren't patients. These were potential stepchildren. The weight of that difference was staggering. How's everyone healing? Zevin, how's your leg? It hurts when I run, Zevin said seriously. But the medical scanner says it is healing appropriately within expected parameters. I can repeat the full technical readout if you would like. That's okay. I trust your summary. Marcus moved closer, noting the slight limp in Zevin's movement as the child stood. Taking it easy on the running? He is terrible at taking it easy, Lyra interjected. He attempts to run every time someone is not watching. Mother says he has inherited father's stubbornness. Sarita's expression flickered with grief before smoothing. Your father believed that life should be lived at full speed. Zevin appears to have absorbed that philosophy completely. Can you sit with us? Kale asked suddenly. Mother said you might visit but that you were also very busy saving other people because that is your job and you are very good at it. But you came. So will you sit? The question was so earnest that Marcus felt something in his chest constrict. Yeah, I can sit. Fair warning though, sitting might look a little awkward. My ribs are still figuring out how they feel about furniture. He lowered himself onto a cushion with significantly less grace than Sarita had displayed, his body reminding him that he had indeed been crushed by building debris less than a week ago. All three children watched this process with fascinated attention. Does it hurt very much? Zevin asked. It hurts a moderate amount. Nothing I can't handle. You were hurt saving us, Lyra said quietly. Mother explained. The building fell on you because you were protecting us with your body. That's pretty much what happened, yeah. Why? The question came from Kale, his head tilted in an expression of genuine confusion. You did not know us. We are not your species. Why would you accept injury for strangers? Marcus considered the question, wanting to give it the serious answer it deserved. Because you needed help and I was in a position to give it. That's kind of the core principle of being a doctor. You see someone hurt or in danger, you help. The rest of the details don't really matter. But you could have died, Lyra pressed. The guard said the building collapse was total. They said anyone inside should not have survived. You gambled your life on a possibility. I gambled my life on a certainty, Marcus corrected. The certainty that I would regret not trying more than I would regret any injury. That if I didn't go in and something happened to you three, I would never stop thinking about the choice I didn't make. The children absorbed this in silence. Then Zevin stood, limped over to Marcus, and climbed directly into his lap with the casual confidence of a very young child who had decided Marcus was safe. The weight was minimal but the trust was immense. You are warm, Zevin announced. Humans maintain higher core temperatures than Valorians. It is pleasant. Like a personal heating unit. Zevin, Sarita said in a tone that suggested this had been discussed previously. We do not climb on people without permission. He said he would help, Zevin said reasonably. Helping includes warmth distribution. Marcus found himself smiling despite the absurdity of the situation. It's fine. I've been compared to heating equipment before. Usually it's less flattering though. Kale scooted closer, his natural curiosity apparently overcoming his initial hesitation. How does human anatomy allow you to run while carrying 3 Valerian juveniles? Our bone density is significantly higher than yours. The weight distribution should have impaired your mobility. Adrenaline is an amazing thing. Also desperation. Never underestimate the power of panic to make you stronger than you normally are. Marcus shifted slightly to better support Zevin's weight. Though to be honest, I wasn't really thinking about biomechanics at the time. I was mostly thinking move fast, don't die, get everyone out. That is a very practical thought process, Kale said approvingly. Efficient. Father always said that efficiency in crisis was the mark of good leadership. Your father sounds like he was very wise. He was the best, Zevin said from his position on Marcus's lap, stating it as indisputable fact. Mother says he gave himself so that we could continue. That his sacrifice was love made into action. Marcus glanced at Sarita, saw the way she had gone very still, her scales showing colors his translator struggled to interpret but that clearly indicated deep emotion. That's a beautiful way to understand it, he said carefully. Do you have children? Lyra asked suddenly. In your human family? No. I have a sister, Andrea, and she has 2 kids. I'm an uncle, which means I get to be the fun adult who gives them back when they're difficult. We are sometimes difficult, Zevin offered helpfully. Mother says it is age-appropriate but also exhausting. Most children are difficult sometimes. It means you're developing properly. Marcus looked at each of them in turn. Your mom explained the Kethrana tradition to me. The life-debt bond. I wanted to meet with you all because if we do this, if we become a family officially, you should have a say in it. You're the ones who would be stuck with me as a stepfather. Stuck is a negative framing, Kale pointed out. Blessed with or honored by would be more positive. Point taken. You would be blessed with me as a stepfather, which honestly sounds like I'm overselling myself, but we'll go with it. Lyra had been quiet, watching Marcus with an intensity that reminded him of her mother. What would you do, she asked finally, if you became our father in the formal sense? What would that look like? It was a fair question and Marcus took it seriously. Honestly, I'm still figuring that out. I know I would want to be someone you could trust. Someone who listens when you need to talk, who helps when you need support, who gives you space when you need independence. I'd probably make mistakes because I don't know all your customs or traditions yet, but I would try to learn. And I would always prioritize your well-being above everything else. Even above mother's political responsibilities? Lyra's eyes were sharp, assessing. Your mother's political responsibilities exist largely to ensure your generation's future. So yes, your well-being is the foundation of everything else. Marcus met her gaze steadily. But I also don't think those things have to be in conflict. Taking care of you is taking care of your people's future. Lyra considered this, then nodded slowly. Father used to say something similar. That the children of Valoria were the reason all politics mattered. That if leadership lost sight of the next generation, it had lost its purpose. Your father and I would probably have gotten along. I think so too. Lyra's expression softened slightly. You may stay. I'm sorry? You may stay and be our father. Officially. I grant permission on behalf of myself and my brothers. Lyra, you cannot grant permission for me, Kale protested. I am perfectly capable of granting my own permission. Which I do. You may be our father. You are acceptable. Acceptable is barely a compliment, Lyra said. It is accurate. He is satisfactory for the role. You two are really not selling this, Marcus said, but he was smiling. I like you, Zevin said simply. You smell warm and you saved us and you listen when we talk. Those are the important qualifications. Everything else can be learned. Marcus looked at Sarita, who was watching the entire exchange with an expression that cycled between amusement, relief, and something that might have been hope. Well, he said. That's 3 votes for keeping me. Your Majesty, what do you think? I think, Sarita said carefully, that my children are excellent judges of character. And I think that you have just successfully navigated a conversation that would challenge most experienced diplomats. She moved closer, her movements carrying that distinctive combination of grace and controlled exhaustion. But agreeing to this partnership requires more than approval from enthusiastic children. It requires understanding what you would be taking on. I'm listening. Over the next 2 hours, Sarita outlined what being her consort would actually mean. There were the obvious responsibilities: co-parenting 3 royal children, representing the Valerian people at diplomatic functions, helping make decisions about resource allocation and community development. But there were also the less obvious challenges: learning Valerian customs and traditions, navigating complex relationships with the Council of Elders, understanding the political dynamics of a refugee population trying to maintain cultural identity while adapting to new circumstances. Our people are traumatized, Sarita said bluntly. They have lost their homeworld, watched their civilization burn. 20,000 refugees are scattered across this colony, trying to rebuild lives from fragments. They look to me for hope and direction, and many days I barely have enough for myself, let alone everyone else. What keeps you going? Marcus asked. Sarita looked at her children, the answer clear in her expression. Knowing that they need a future worth having. Knowing that every decision I make echoes forward into the lives they will lead. That's a lot of pressure. It is immense pressure. Which is why I need a partner. Her eyes met his. Not someone to carry the burden for me, but someone to share it with. Someone who sees the people beneath the politics, who remembers that leadership is ultimately about service. Marcus thought about his career, about the countless disaster zones and refugee camps, about the way medicine had always been about seeing individuals rather than statistics. I understand service. It's basically my entire professional identity. I know. That is why I asked you. Sarita's scales shifted to colors that Marcus was learning to associate with serious intent. But I need you to understand what you would be sacrificing. Your privacy would largely disappear. Your decisions would be scrutinized by 20,000 people with strong opinions. Your relationship with me would be political as well as personal, at least in public perception. What about in private? The question made Sarita pause. In private, I would hope we could build something genuine. Not immediately, perhaps. I am still grieving my husband, and rushing into romantic partnership would honor neither his memory nor your dignity. But friendship, respect, genuine partnership in raising my children and leading my people, those things I can offer honestly. That's fair, Marcus said. And honestly, more comfortable than pretending instant romance. I'm not really the love at first sight type anyway. What type are you? Marcus considered the question. They gradually realize I care deeply while being completely oblivious until someone points it out, type. My sister finds it endlessly entertaining. Sarita's laugh was unexpected and genuine, transforming her face into something younger, less burdened. That is actually reassuring. I have had quite enough of sudden intensity. Gradual sounds infinitely more manageable. By the time Marcus left the royal quarters several hours later, Zevin had fallen asleep on him twice, Kale had asked approximately 400 questions about human biology and Earth customs, and Lyra had shown him her drawings of the building collapse with the kind of clinical detail that suggested she was processing trauma in her own way. Sarita had shared more about Valerian culture, about the specific rituals that would be involved in their bonding ceremony, about the expectations various council members would have. It was overwhelming and complicated and politically fraught, and Marcus found himself thinking, yes, this is something I want to try. Over the following week, Marcus split his time between his regular medical duties and what he privately called royal education. The Valerian Council assigned him a cultural liaison, a patient elderly male named Trevith whose scales had faded to pale silver with age. Trevith took his role seriously, walking Marcus through everything from proper forms of address to the symbolic meaning of various colors in Valerian scale displays. When greeting the council formally, you acknowledge the eldest member first, regardless of rank, Trevith explained during one session. Age is accorded deep respect in our culture. To ignore an elder in favor of a younger individual, even one of higher political standing, would be considered profoundly insulting. Got it? Age before rank. Marcus was taking notes, his handwriting deteriorating as he tried to keep up with the flood of information. What about the scale color thing? Sarita mentioned that emotions show through color shifts, but I'm still struggling to read them accurately. That will come with time and observation. Some colors are obvious. Reds indicate anger or passion. Blues suggest calm or sadness. But the subtler shades and patterns require familiarity. Her Majesty's scales, for instance, often show complex layering that reflects her mixed emotional states. She's carrying a lot. She is carrying everything, Trevith said quietly. Which is why your acceptance of this role matters beyond the personal. It shows our people that she is not alone. That she has support. That we can build new family structures even after losing so much. The weight of that realization settled over Marcus. This wasn't just about him and Sarita and 3 children. It was about symbolism, about hope for an entire displaced population. That's a lot of pressure. Yes. But you have already shown you can handle pressure. You ran into a collapsing building. Everyone keeps bringing that up. Because it is the measure against which your future actions will be judged. You proved you will sacrifice for our people. Now you must prove you will endure for us. Marcus's medical colleagues had mixed reactions to the news. Most were supportive in the slightly bewildered way of people who couldn't quite believe what they were hearing. Yuki appointed herself his unofficial advisor on all things domestic, despite having no more experience with alien royalty than Marcus did. You need to establish boundaries early, she said during one of their supply room conversations. Make it clear that you're still Dr. Chen the medic, not just Prince Consort whoever. Otherwise you'll get lost in the role. I don't think there's a protocol for maintaining my medic identity while also being alien royalty. Then make one. You're good at improvising. Yuki handed him a pack of surgical supplies with unnecessary force. Also, when's the ceremony? Because I called dibs on being your best human and I stand by that claim. Probably in about 3 weeks. They need time to prepare, and apparently there are a lot of rituals involved. 3 weeks to completely change your life. That seems reasonable and not at all terrifying. Your sarcasm is noted and unhelpful. The children became a regular part of Marcus's routine. They would appear at the medical bay during his breaks, ostensibly to check on their healing progress but actually just to spend time with him. Zevin remained convinced that Marcus was the best heating source in the colony. Kale peppered him with endless questions about everything from human medicine to Earth politics. Lyra was quieter, but Marcus noticed the way she watched him, assessing, making sure he was genuine. One afternoon, about 2 weeks before the scheduled bonding ceremony, Lyra appeared at the medical bay alone. Marcus was cataloging antibiotic supplies, a task that always helped him think, and looked up in surprise. Hey Lyra. Everything okay? Where are your brothers? Kale is with our tutors and Zevin is napping. Mother believes he is having a growth acceleration period and requires additional rest. She moved into the supply room with the casual confidence of someone who had decided Marcus was safe territory. I wanted to talk to you without audience. Okay. What's on your mind? Lyra was quiet for a moment, her scales shifting through colors that Marcus was learning to identify as uncertainty mixed with determination. Do you actually want this? Or are you doing it because you feel obligated by saving our lives? The question was so direct that Marcus had to respect it. He set down the supply manifest and gave her his full attention. That's a fair question. And I think the honest answer is that it started as obligation, or at least responsibility. I saved your lives, your mother explained the Kethrana tradition, and I felt like I should at least consider it seriously. But, Lyra prompted. But then I met you three. Spent time with you. Watched Zevon decide I'm an acceptable heat source and Kale ask me approximately 10,000 questions, and you work through trauma by drawing incredibly detailed scenes. Marcus smiled. And I realized this isn't about obligation anymore. I genuinely like you kids. I think I could actually be good at being your father, or at least good enough to matter. What about Mother? Your mom is remarkable. She's carrying impossible weight with grace, and she's doing it while grieving and trying to give you three a stable childhood. I respect that immensely. But do you like her? Lyra's eyes were sharp, assessing. Not respect. Like, as a person, not just as a queen. Marcus considered the question carefully. I think I'm getting there. We've spent a lot of time talking over the past couple weeks. She's funny when she lets herself be, which isn't often enough. She's brilliant at strategy but sometimes forgets to eat when she's focused on problems. She hums when she's working, which apparently drives the council insane but which I find kind of charming. He met Lyra's gaze. I don't love her yet, if that's what you're asking. But I think I could. Given time and patience and the chance to actually know her without the pressure of political performance. Lyra nodded slowly, apparently satisfied with this answer. Good. I wanted to make sure you were not pretending. Father always said that honest foundation was essential for anything meant to last. That lies of convenience eventually became structures of collapse. Your father was clearly a smart man. He was. And Mother deserves someone who can appreciate that intelligence and match it with his own. She moved toward the door, then paused. I am glad you said yes, Dr. Chin. We need you. More than I think you understand yet. After she left, Marcus sat with that conversation for a long time, thinking about the weight these children carried, the way they had already learned to assess adult intentions and motivations. They had been forced to grow up too quickly, to understand too much about loss and politics and survival. Maybe that was exactly why they needed someone who would let them just be kids sometimes. The bonding ceremony preparations consumed the entire Valerian community. Marcus learned that in traditional circumstances, such ceremonies took months to plan and involved resources that simply didn't exist anymore. But the community was determined to honor their queen and mark this new beginning with appropriate celebration. We cannot provide the sacred oils from the 7 moons, Trevith explained during one planning session. But our chemists have synthesized something similar using available materials. It will not be traditional, but it will be meaningful. Meaningful is better than traditional anyway, Marcus offered. Tradition for tradition's sake seems less important than marking something real. The council members present exchanged glances, and Marcus worried he'd said something wrong. Then Draxon spoke. That is precisely the kind of thinking we need going forward. The ability to honor what was while embracing what must be. Sarita had been largely absent during the planning, pulled in multiple directions by the demands of leadership. But 3 days before the ceremony, she appeared at Marcus's quarters late in the evening, looking more exhausted than he had ever seen her. Is this a bad time? She asked. Never a bad time. Come in. Marcus gestured to his small living space, suddenly aware of how utilitarian it was compared to the royal quarters. Is everything okay? Define okay. Sarita moved to his single chair and sat with the kind of exhaustion that went beyond physical tiredness. The council is arguing about ceremony details, the supply allocation committee is fighting over resource distribution, someone started a rumor that our bonding is politically motivated rather than genuine, and I have not slept more than 4 hours in the past 3 days. That sounds significantly not okay. I am questioning everything, Sarita said quietly. Wondering if I am doing right by my people, by my children, by you. Wondering if this bonding is fair to anyone involved or if I am simply imposing my needs onto everyone else's lives. Marcus moved to sit on the floor near her chair, looking up at her face. Can I be honest? Please. I've been questioning everything too. Wondering if I'm remotely qualified for this, if I'm going to catastrophically mess up these kids who have already been through too much, if I'm doing this for the right reasons or just because I'm too stubborn to admit something is beyond my capabilities. He smiled slightly. But then I remember that certainty is overrated. Sometimes the best decisions are the ones we make while scared, while uncertain, while hoping desperately that we're not completely wrong. That is not particularly reassuring. No, but it's honest. And I think honest is what we need from each other. Not confident performances or political polish. Just genuine attempts to figure this out together. Sarita's scales shifted through colors that Marcus had learned to recognize as relief mixed with gratitude. I am so tired of performing. Of being the strong leader who has all answers. Of pretending my grief is manageable and my hope is unshakable. Then don't. Not with me. Be tired, be uncertain, be grieving. I can handle that. What I can't handle is pretending everything is fine when it clearly isn't. How are you so calm about all this? Marcus laughed. I'm absolutely not calm. I'm terrified. But I'm also committed. There's a difference between not being scared and moving forward despite being scared. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that didn't need filling. Finally, Sarita spoke again. 3 days until we bind our lives together. Until you become father to my children and partner in my leadership. Until everything changes irrevocably. Last chance to back out, Marcus offered. Are you trying to? No. You. No. Sarita smiled, the expression tired but genuine. I think we are both in this now. For better or worse. Probably for worse initially, then gradually better as we figure out what we're doing. That is a very Marcus way of viewing things. I contain multitudes. None of them particularly optimistic, but all relatively practical. The bonding ceremony took place in the largest communal space the colony could provide, a converted cargo bay that the Valerian community had transformed with fabric hangings, portable heating units, and careful arrangements of light that created shadows and warmth in equal measure. Marcus stood at one end wearing formal Valerian robes that Trevith had insisted were appropriate for the occasion and which Marcus thought made him look like he was wearing curtains, but in a culturally respectful way. The assembled crowd was larger than he had anticipated. It seemed like the entire Valerian refugee population had turned out, along with a significant number of humans and other species from the colony. Commander Lu stood in the front row wearing her dress uniform and an expression of barely suppressed amusement. Yuki had indeed claimed the position of best human, and was taking her role very seriously, which mostly involved making sure Marcus didn't trip over his ceremonial robes. Then Sarita entered, and Marcus forgot about the crowd and the robes and everything else except the woman moving toward him. She wore traditional royal colors, deep purples that seemed to shift in the light, her scales showing the emerald brilliance of the royal bloodline. Behind her walked Lyra, Kale, and Zevin, all three wearing smaller versions of formal robes and all three watching Marcus with expressions that ranged from solemn, Lyra, to curious, Kale, to openly excited, Zevin. The ceremony itself was a combination of traditional Valerian bonding rituals and adaptations necessitated by their current circumstances. Draxon officiated, his voice carrying harmonics that Marcus's translator rendered into formal English about unity and family and hope built from loss. Dr. Marcus Chin of Earth, Draxon intoned, you stand before this assembly to bind yourself to Queen Sarita of Valoria, to accept the sacred trust of Kethrana, to become father to her children and partner in her leadership. Do you accept this bond freely and with full understanding of its weight? Marcus's mouth was dry but his voice was steady. I do. And do you pledge to honor the memory of what was lost while building toward what might be? To see the people you now serve as individuals worthy of care rather than political abstractions? To be present even when perfection eludes you? I do. And Marcus meant it, every word. Sarita's portion of the ceremony followed similar patterns, her voice clear despite the emotion Marcus could see in the shifting colors of her scales. When it came time for the symbolic joining, hands clasped with the synthesized oils mingling between their palms, Marcus felt the weight of 20,000 watching eyes and chose to ignore them entirely. He focused on Sarita's face, on the tentative hope he saw there, on the children standing nearby watching with fierce attention. By the traditions of Valoria and the adaptations of necessity, I declare this bond recognized and honored, Draxon announced. What was separate is now unified. What was individual is now family. The crowd erupted in a cacophony of celebration. Valerian trilling mixed with human cheers and the distinctive harmonic calls of the other species present. Zevin immediately latched onto Marcus's leg, his small arms wrapped tight. Kale was asking questions about the chemical composition of the ceremonial oils. Lyra stood slightly apart, but Marcus saw the way her scales had shifted to colors his translator identified as profound relief and cautious joy. Sarita leaned close enough that only Marcus could hear her. We have just made an irrevocable choice. Yeah. How do you feel about that? Her smile was small but genuine. Ask me in a year. Or 10. When we have had time to see if this impossible thing we have built can actually stand. Fair enough. Marcus looked at the children, at the celebrating crowd, at this woman who had trusted him with everything that mattered to her. But for what it's worth, I'm in. Completely. Whatever comes next, we figure it out together. Together, Sarita repeated, testing the word. That is something I have not had since my husband died. Partnership in the truest sense. Well, you have it now. And I promise to be at minimum 70% competent at this whole consort and stepfather thing. 70% seems optimistic. I'm feeling generous. The ceremony robes are making me confident. Sarita laughed, the sound bright and unexpected, and Marcus realized that making her laugh might become his favorite part of this entire arrangement. The celebration continued around them, the Valerian community marking this moment as both ending and beginning. Loss acknowledged, hope embraced, future uncertain but faced together. 3 weeks ago, Marcus had been a medic with a well-organized supply closet and a tendency to make questionable decisions in emergency situations. Now he was prince consort to an alien queen, stepfather to 3 royal children, and co-leader of 20,000 refugees trying to build something meaningful from catastrophic loss. It was absolutely insane. It was probably going to be incredibly difficult. And as Zevon climbed up to his shoulder, as Kale began explaining Valerian celebration traditions with enthusiastic detail, as Lyra moved closer to stand beside him with tentative trust, as Sarita's hand found his and squeezed gently, Marcus thought maybe it was exactly what he was meant to do. Not because he was qualified or prepared or certain, but because sometimes the best families were the ones you built from impossible circumstances and stubborn hope. And sometimes being enough meant simply showing up, being present, and trying your absolute best even when you had no idea what you were doing. The celebration lasted well into the night, and by the time it ended, Marcus had been welcomed into more conversations, accepted more congratulations, and answered more questions about human biology and Earth customs than he thought possible. His ribs ached, his feet hurt, and his brain felt like it had been running at maximum capacity for approximately 12 hours straight. But when he finally made it back to what were now officially the shared royal quarters, when he saw 3 sleeping children curled up on their heating cushions and Sarita looking at him with an expression that mixed exhaustion and gratitude and the beginning of genuine partnership, Marcus thought that maybe 70% competent was going to be enough after all. Maybe it was exactly what they all needed. And as he settled into this impossible new life, Marcus made himself a promise. He would show up every day, be honest about his limitations, learn from his mistakes, and never stop trying to be worthy of the trust these 4 individuals had placed in him. The rest would figure itself out. Or it wouldn't, and they would adapt. That, Marcus was learning, was what families did. They adapted, they endured, they built something meaningful from whatever materials they had available. And if that wasn't heroic in the traditional sense, it was at least profoundly human. Which, in the end, was exactly what they needed him to be.